Hello and welcome to the Kick Sugar Summit, the world's first summit on the topic of sugar, sugar addiction, and sugar addiction recovery. We know that if we're going to reverse our rising rates of chronic disease, we need to reduce or eliminate our consumption of sugar and refined carbohydrates. We are here to help you do that. There are a lot of speakers on our summit and a lot of information. Don't get overwhelmed. Catch who you can and just let the rest go. Alternatively, you could purchase one of our Summit VIP packages, which comes with an awesome ebook summarizing the core insights of each speaker, a year's worth of resources from our world of experts, and access to a whole year of weekly drop-in live Q&As with me, Florence, your host. Thank you for being here. I hope you love the summit, and I hope it changes your life.
All right, welcome to the 9th annual Kick Sugar Summit. I'm your host today, Molly Painshab, and I am here today with Amanda Leith. Amanda launched Shift Recovery by Acorn in the spring of 2019, opening an exciting new chapter in the 25-year legacy of Acorn Food Dependency Recovery Services. Amanda is an addiction counselor, a certified food addiction counselor, FAI Acorn certified addiction professional, and CNAPS trained advanced relapse prevention specialist with a background in drug and alcohol addiction counseling and group facilitation at a Vancouver-based nonprofit residential treatment center for women. She sits on the board of directors for the Food Addiction Institute, and I'm so honored for you to be here with me today. Amanda, welcome to the Kick Sugar Summit.
Thanks, Molly. Thank you for inviting me here. And I am honored as well to talk about this topic that's very near and dear to me.
Awesome. Well, I always like to get the personal and professional journey. So can you kind of tell us about like that story? How did you get to be the operations director of Shift Recovery by Acorn?
Yeah. So first of all, I am a recovering food addict. And so it is a very personal story for me. And I'll just tell a little bit of my story. As a young child, I definitely enjoyed my food. I was a chubby little girl. I was not obese by any stretch, but I certainly enjoyed food. And I actually grew up in a very healthy food home. I'm Canadian. I live on the West Coast. My parents were both hippies, and we had really what we would call healthy food. And then when I hit high school, I discovered some other things that were exciting to me, and they were alcohol and drugs and boys. And my food was not nearly as important to me anymore. And in my early 20s, some things occurred that I decided that I would put down drugs and alcohol, and I put that in quotations because I certainly was not sober, but I would cut them back. And what I see now is my food just exploded, and I went into a downward spiral for the next 20 years of what I then thought was trying to figure out my obesity problem. I gained more and more and more weight, and I worked really hard to try and deal with what I was told was an obesity problem, the diets, the calories in, calories out. I also was told I had an eating disorder. So I worked extremely hard with very well-meaning practitioners about an eating disorder. So dealing with emotions and getting life skills. So for probably 20 years, I was treated for obesity and an eating disorder. And again, that would include, diets like pay and weigh diets, like Weight Watchers and Dr. Bernstein, and getting therapy. And honestly, everything got worse. My weight got higher and higher and higher. My health got worse and worse and worse. My emotions, my mental, my self-loathing my depression got deeper and deeper. And I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I was just starting to become an addictions counselor. And I knew a lot about addictions. I'd been in and out of 12-step rooms. And I decided that as part of my professional world, I wanted to learn how to treat food addiction. I'd heard of food addiction. And so I called up what was then called Acorn to get not professional treatment, to learn their program to treat food addicts. And what I was told then when I talked to the then owner, Phil Burdell, was, Amanda, I think you need to come and get professional treatment. Anyways, needless to say, I walked in the door of Acorn a week later into one of their intensive treatment programs for food addiction, and I was well over 300 pounds and high cholesterol. I was now diabetic, high blood pressure, very, very depressed. And what happened was, for the very first time, I got treatment for my proper diagnosis, and that was addiction to sugar, addiction to food. And I have actually been abstinent and sober from food, drugs, and alcohol since the day I walked in there. And that was after 20 plus years of working really hard to fix my problem. So at that point in time, as I say, I was working at a drug and alcohol treatment center in Vancouver. I live in Vancouver, Canada. And I knew right away that I needed to be around the food addiction world, because this was going to be a tough recovery for me. And so I started volunteering / working with Acorn. So I was doing both Acorn and so Acorn was in Florida at the time, and both Acorn and my treatment center in Vancouver, both part-time. And then about a year in, both of them wanted me to come full-time, and I couldn't do both of them full-time. And, I'll tell you that I already had figured out that working with drug addicts and alcoholics was far easier than food addicts, in my experience. But I just had this calling to work with people that were struggling with food and sugar addiction, because that is really what had almost killed me. And I just thought I could offer more. So I left my job here and worked with Acorn full time. And then 4.5 years ago, the co-founders were getting ready to retire, Phil Riddell and Mary Fushi, and it just was right time, right place. And I purchased the company, and we changed the name to Shift, which means sobriety, hope, freedom, and transformation. And here we are. And I will say that one of my the most important things for me was to keep the integrity of what Acorn had been doing for the last 30 years. And so we've really kept a lot of our treatment programs similar, and we've added more programs, really just in the hopes of spreading the word that if you're struggling, it's possible that it's addiction and there's treatment out there. So that's how I kind of got to sitting in this chair today.
Amazing. I love it. It's funny how life does that to us, right? Like, it puts these things in our path, and we have these opportunities to either say yes or say, well, no, thank you. And it sounds like you said a lot of yeses. I mean, there were probably a lot of no thank yous, but it sounds like there were a lot of yeses too that got you to this place. So can you tell us more about the mission of Shift? Like, as an agency of, I don't know, like, you tell us, you give us your words, like, what is Shift all about?
Sure. I think it's always important just to start very briefly to give the origins of Shift, then Acorn, and then Glen Bay. So I'll just say briefly that in the 80s, there was a psychiatric hospital in Florida called Glen Bay. And they actually had a wing that treated addiction. And as part of that wing, they treated food and sugar addiction. We've kind of gone backwards in the world of treatment. When they lost the funding. And so they closed down the wing, that part of the hospital. And Phil was one of the counselors there. And so basically Acorn came out of, oh my gosh, how are we going to support the alumni that were here? And so they just did this kind of 5-day residential retreat at someone's house that took the main principles of Glen Bay Hospital, their 6-week intensive in-person program, and put it into 5 days. And thus the program, the intensive, was created, which is the program I did. And they did that for I don't know what it was, 28 years or something. And so we're really riding on the heels of that. So shift. So as I said, the name shift is sobriety, hope, freedom, and transformation. And so our mission is really number one, really letting people know that if you've been struggling with food, sugar, body, emotional eating, there's a possibility that addiction is present. And then if addiction is present, we offer treatment for that. And that is the disease model, abstinence-based model of addiction. And it's very, very similar to how we treat drug addicts and alcoholics. And it's really about supporting people to lift themselves up out of the trenches of addiction to food and sugar and different eating behaviors. So it's an abstinence-based model that we start with the physical, so abstinence first, so we can start the brain healing, and then very quickly, the whole food part of it is really the smallest part of it. Then very quickly we get into the support around our emotional, our spiritual, our mental sobriety, if you will. So it's just about, shift is about providing people a treatment model for food as a substance use disorder. That's who we are and what we do.
Okay. So what is Shift's stance on sugar? We're on the Kick Sugar Summit today. What is Shift's stance on sugar or food in general?
Yeah. Well, so we absolutely believe that sugar can be an addictive substance. And there's a lot of science behind that. And there'll be, I'm sure on this summit, you'll have doctors and scientists that can speak about this much more medically than I can. So we strongly believe that sugar is an addictive substance as well as some other foods and eating behaviors. So our stance is that if you are addicted, meaning you now have a chemical dependency, so you have brain changes because of these substances, then you have an addiction. And if we're addicted, to have long-term recovery and freedom from this, we need to start with physical abstinence. And then, as I just said, get a lot of support to live in this world, because chances are people that have an addiction, they also have some of the emotional struggles. So they need a lot of support. So again, if you are addicted, our belief is that you need to abstain from whatever the substances is, whether it's sugar, flour, volume of food. You need to abstain in order for your brain to start healing, so you then can get the emotional, spiritual sobriety, which is what we're going for, freedom. It's not white knuckling. And so for Shift, we're not working with people that are just like heavy users, or every once in a while they eat a lot of sugar, or you had a hard day, so you have a tub of ice cream. I mean, people do that. That's not what people are coming to us for. It's not a diet. It's not a feel-good thing. It's if you have addiction to sugar, which we absolutely believe is an addictive substance, then this is how we experience long-term recovery from people, whether it's sugar or other food substances.
Okay. So how might someone know that maybe they have a problem with sugar consumption? Like what should we look for if we're like watching this, we're like hearing you share what you're sharing, and I'm starting to question, like, maybe I do, but I'm not sure what to look out for.
Yeah, such a good question. And one of the things, well, actually, I'll say two things. With addiction in general, it's not like we can have a blood test and go, "Yeah, you're addicted." So it's not that clear. And then there's all these nuances with food and sugar and the messages that we get in the world and the diet industry there's, everything in moderation. It is a confusing industry. There is no question about it. And so I will say this sounds kind of cavalier, and I don't mean it to be, but one of the things for me, if we're spending a fair bit of time questioning, do I have a problem with X, Y, or Z? there's a good chance, because if I don't have a problem with certain things, I don't spend a lot of time questioning it. So that's one thing for me. And then there are absolutely, and we really follow the substance use criteria in the DSM-5 Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So it kind of is like, do I continue to consume sugar despite having negative consequences? Like, I was pre-diabetic, and then I was diabetic. Then I was giving myself needles every day. So was I continuing to consume sugar, even though my doctor was like, Amanda, you need to cut back. Your blood sugar numbers are getting high. So do I continue using despite having negative consequences? And they could be physical consequences. They could be, I start being more interested in consuming sugar or getting sugar or thinking about sugar or any food for that matter. And it's taking away from the other parts of my life. Is it affecting my school or my work or even my relationships at home? If I'm a parent, do I just want to get the kids to bed so I can, eat my tub of ice cream or something like that? Have I started noticing that I have a higher tolerance level? Like, do I need more and more and more just to feel okay? If I ever do stop, do I have withdrawal symptoms? Do I go into detox? Do I crave it? Do I think about it? Am I spending more and more time using or getting my substance or thinking about it? For me, I really did feel like a drug addict. I would spend my day was about, I worked, I was high functioning, but what was I going to eat on my drive home? What was I going to eat when I got home? What was I going to eat after dinner? So was I spending more and more time? Has anyone in my life told me they're concerned about my sugar consumption or what's happening, my body size, whether it's overweight, underweight? And I want to be super clear. Our body size is not indicative of whether we're addicted or we can be underweight, overweight, a healthy weight. That really has nothing to do with it. Am I using more than I intended? So do I say to myself, okay, I'm going to have one cookie after dinner. And the next thing I know, I'm having 6 cookies. And do I have cravings for it? Do I have urges for it? So it's things like that I want to take a look out for.
Okay, so now we've heard like these signs that we're looking for, and maybe now we're thinking, okay, that's me. I yes, 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 I check all of those boxes. So what would you suggest to someone who's maybe watching the summit for the first time and they're now thinking, maybe I need to kick sugar, I need to cut back on sugar? Like, what would you suggest to them? What challenges might they face in the first few days? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because we get so much information. I mean, it's information overload when we're talking about food and body. And so I think first of all, I think the great news is there's a lot of support out there. And so if we're starting to wonder about this, so there are a couple things. Like, we can actually get some assessments. There's the Yale Food Addiction Scale, which we certainly offer for free on our website. There's sugar assessment, which was created by Bitten Johnson. So there is some assessments that we can get. There's also many of us, and I'm sure you'll hear many of us on the summit, that offer free consults, so we can talk to someone. Hey, this is what's going on for me. What do you think? And they're many free, and there's literally a plethora of them. And again, I think you'll hear many of us on the Sugar Summit. So my suggestion is start looking for people that can support you. And again, there's lots of free resources out there. And if you're really interested, you can take one of these assessments. And then you really want to get a lot of support. You want to be around not only support from professionals, but you want to try and hook up with people that are on the same journey as you. So again, there's many of us now that are providing this kind of treatment. There's 12-step groups. And so whatever it is that fits for you, we need a team of people, peers and professionals that can support us with this, because as you said, what are the challenges? It's not a small deal. It's not just like, oh, well, especially if addiction is present. So again, I want to be really clear. There's going to be different levels and different reasons why we want to kick sugar, many, many different reasons for people. And I think the important thing is that we know what our reason is, and we know what level am I? Is this just something that, do I want to cut down on sugar just for a couple months? I want to feel better. I want to see what it's like. It's not really a big deal in my life. Is it just for health reasons? Is it, what is going on? And then, or is it addiction? And if addiction is present, then I want to get treatment for that. So I really that's why I want to talk to some professionals about what is it for me? And so some of the challenges, and again, whether you're addicted or not, I also want to say, I believe there's different levels of addiction. So I think, if we're in early stages of addiction to sugar, we're not going to need to do the same stuff that someone's in late stages. So we really want to be aware of what that is. And a lot of it's through trial and error. And so some of the things that will happen is like withdrawal from sugar is a real thing. And that's going to happen in the first couple of days for many people, not to everybody, but for many people. So I might have a lot of cravings and urges to use. So I need a lot of support. I might be tired. I might be cranky. My body might be achy. And if addiction is present, I mean, it really is true. Like your brain is like, whoa, give me my substance so I can just feel normal. So there is major changes going on in our body. So as well as challenges, other people saying, oh, come on, just have one. Everywhere we go, there's food, there's sugar. It's a whole culture, and so I think it's important to know that it is going to be challenging. This isn't easy. So have compassion for yourself. Set yourself up for success, and treat yourself with a lot of love and kindness. This is not easy stuff. And again, it's all over the world. And our food industry, it's a whole interview on its own, but I just want to touch on this, is that you're not crazy if you're struggling to put down sugar. Our food industry is creating food that is harmful and addictive. And one of the biggest challenges with sugar is that there's so many different names for sugar. And when we're trying to cut sugar out, how the heck do we cut something else out when we don't even know what it's called? We don't even know what we're looking for on labels. And I'll tell you that the food industry has gotten very tricky about being able to hide a lot of sugar in their products because it does have so many different names. So this is a whole beast, on its own. And so I say that to people in the sense to know this is a big deal. And therefore you need treatment support to the same level of what a big deal it is and what a big deal it is for you. And it's a tricky world. It's a tricky world with sugar. So there will be challenges. And it's just exciting that you're even taking a look. That's the first step. I'm just taking a look at this in my life. Do I want to do something about it? Do I not want to do something about it? What level do I want to do about it? So it's like just being curious about it and then trying stuff out.
Hearing you share today, I randomly just had this thought that I needed to ask you this question. We're talking about, on one end of the spectrum, maybe somebody who eats the tub of ice cream after a bad day at work or a breakup, but otherwise maybe doesn't have, issues with it. Then there's more of like the harmful user, and then there's all the way into addiction. And we're talking about cutting back sugar, kicking sugar. At what point, or is it possible that if I'm on that lower end of things, I'm just the person who's eating the ice cream after a bad breakup or a bad day at work, can that progress to addiction? And what should I be looking out for with that? Like, how might I be like, oh, quick, I need to nip this in the bud before it goes any further?
Well, Molly, I'm so glad you said that to me. Yeah. Big and important question. So yes, absolutely. absolutely we can go from, oh, I'm just having a tub of ice cream because I had a bad day at work, no big deal, to full blown face down in addiction. So again, it's, if we're talking about addiction, addiction can start from many different ways, but one of them is prolonged use. So if I'm continually introducing an addictive substance to my body over a prolonged period of time, I can then become addicted. And once I'm addicted, I'm never not going to be addicted. I can be in remission, but I'm ever not going to be addicted. So can I arrest it early on that I don't go into addiction? Or if I am addicted, can I stay at a high level of addiction? And my belief is yes to both of those questions. My belief is yes. And so, this is tough in the sense that, sugar is really a non-nutritive, highly addictive substance. So sugar is not something we need. And I just want to say this. I'm talking about added sugar. I'm not talking about natural sugars. That's again a different conversation. So I believe that even if your life is not face down in the food addicted, it's a really important thing to take a look at, which is why this summit is so brilliant, Kick Sugar. And all levels are on here, because I do believe that it's worthwhile taking a look at how much you're using any addictive substance, alcohol, sugar, anything. And can I, I think it is important to pay attention. Is this, if I'm having a tub of ice cream after work because I've had a bad day, so I'm using that to feel better, and it does work. The deal is our brain then can get the message, oh, this makes me feel better. So if I keep using sugar to feel better, my brain will keep remembering, oh, this made me feel better. And eventually it will need that to feel better. So what I would say to that is, I think it's very important to look at it. And how am I using it? Is it just, am I out with my family or friends? It's a hot day and I'm having an ice cream cone? I mean, in my opinion, okay. If I'm not allergic, and why not? But if I'm using it for anything on a consistent basis, I want to take a look, because very often that will turn into, once in a while, I'm a binge user, I'm a hard user, and then I'm an addict. So I do 100% believe there's different levels. I believe it is progressive, meaning we can start a very, very light user and end up in addiction. And unfortunately, once our brain has gone into the addictive mode, we're not going backwards. I will say one other thing, that I believe at any level, if I start treating my addiction early, by the time people come to shift, we're not usually dealing with early. We're mid to late stage sugar food addicts. But if we do treat our addiction early, I think we can arrest it at that place. And then that person doesn't necessarily have to do all the things that those of us like me that are face down full blown addiction. So there is so much point in stopping, checking out, getting curious about my using of these substances long before we're in the criteria that I read about having all these negative consequences on my life.
I agree. As you were describing that, I was thinking, wow, this sounds like alcohol. Or, like when we think of something that's maybe a little more progressive, not like methamphetamine, the first time that has this huge hit, something more like alcohol or nicotine or caffeine, like these kind of like over the course of time, that that pattern that you were talking about, that was like, oh, I'm learning, this makes me feel good, or every time I'm stressed, I'm going to go take a puff off a cigarette or whatever it might be, or, oh, I just need my caffeine hit to get my day going. You do that over and over and over again. And now it's this exposure thing that can also wear that same pathway. It doesn't have to be immediate. Because yeah, absolutely. So I thank you for that beautiful description and for answering that question. I'm wondering.
Molly, I just want to say,
yeah.
you just used the perfect word, exposure. That's the word. Like it's the exposure. The more we expose ourselves, you're absolutely right. That's a great word to describe it. It's exposure.
Yeah, because it's everything, right? It's our cell phones, it's It could even be toxic relationships. Like it could be anything that we are like exposed to for a long period, right? Our system starts to kind of change in response to that stimuli or that input, whatever it might be. And the good news is though, like you were saying, we can arrest it and we can go into remission, right? But that we just can't undo it because it's those rutted neural pathways. The brain just doesn't work like that. We do have neuroplasticity though, right? Where we can create new pathways and we can heal just in different ways. It's like the same as getting a traumatic brain injury is like I like to describe it, right? Like it's once that part of the brain is damaged, we can't undo the damage. It doesn't regrow, but we go to things like physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy and all of those different therapies to relearn how to use a spoon or how to walk. It just uses different parts of our brain to create those neural pathways that are necessary for those functions. And the same can be true for addiction, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah. So well put. And for me, it's like, I look at addiction in two parts. There's the physical part, and the mental, emotional part. And so when we say we can never undo addiction, what we're actually talking about is the physical part of addiction, meaning that the only way to be free of the cravings, the urges, to be physically free of our substances is to not have them. So no, not yet anyways. There's no medication where we can take a medication and then I can use the substances that I'm addicted to and not run the risk of running into cravings and urges, right? It could be that I might want to, this is where it gets tricky, I'll say, with addiction, is that it might be that I'm addicted. And one time I'm like, oh, I'm just going to have this cookie and nothing happens. And that's a deadly place for people because I'm like, oh, you see, but if we're addicted and we use our substances, at some point, we will go into having cravings and urges where we're not going to be able to stop. So that's the physical part of it. So that's where we're not erasing that. However, the next part of it, the mental, emotional, that's where we can do all the healing. And in my experience, though, we must put the substance down first and then to have the biggest bang in our emotional mental healing. And we can do so much healing on this side of it. And like you're saying, we can learn to feed ourselves again. Well, really, we're learning new ways of being in the world because the food, the substance became a way for us to live in the world. So we just need new life skills. And, I'll say this about addiction, is that I believe, addiction is one of the diseases that the bonus of it is that we can once we've had treatment for addiction, we can come out in a far better place than we even were before we became addicted. Like it's an amazing journey. It's not easy. It's hard. But if you allow yourself to get through the challenging parts, it's phenomenal. So yes, so much healing and amazing lives are available for people. And unfortunately, is it what doesn't get healed is that I will be able to someday somehow use that substance again, which is always what we want. We want to use the substance without having any of the negative consequences. I don't know a way. I haven't seen that yet. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Molly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so speaking of, like you said, there's the biological side and then there's the psychosocial, emotional, spiritual side of things when it comes to something like addiction, or even harmful use, abuse, whatever. And so I was wondering if you would kind of tell us about your program, your staff, like what would someone expect from working with Shift? Like, would I be taking like a life skills class and somebody's going to teach me how to cook? And maybe that's not something you offer. Or are you going to teach me how to emotionally regulate? Can you kind of dive a bit more into the specifics of like what Shift does to treat addiction?
Yeah. So we have actually several different programs, and they're designed. They are designed for people at different levels of addiction, and the majority of our clients, as I say, are mid to late stage addicts. So it really depends on where people come in. So we often do a lot of free consultations with people, just talking about where they're at. And sometimes we're not a fit, so I might be referring them on to other places. But if someone decides to work with us, there's several different things. So there's kind of the what would be kind of the base level or the starter not really a great word, if you would, for someone either who's not deep in addiction yet or really isn't sure. There are two programs. One, we have a program, a virtual 30-day program online that is completely self-paced, that walks you through. And that is absolutely for people that are early stage food addicts or not quite addicted or don't know yet. It's a beautiful program based after what we do, but it doesn't have a lot of support. You're on your own, you're self-paced, you're doing your own thing. We also have a similar program called Get Food Freedom Now, which is coming up. And that is a 4-week program that is, you're on live virtually with a group and a facilitator, and you're really walking through the basics of, you're getting a food plan. So that's the first thing you're getting. And then very quickly, you're going into the emotional life skills. And so along with the food plan, absolutely, you're getting support around groceries and how you put your food together. We're not doing cooking classes at this time. We have in the past, but that's not part of that program. So it's really the basics, and it's with, there's 1 or 2 facilitators, and it will look at the basics. We'll talk briefly about addiction, give you your food plan, and then we do start with work. We get right into people, right in with people, working with them on their emotions, what's coming up for them. Because the deal is, as soon as we put down our substance at whatever level we're at, feelings are going to start coming up. We just can't not, right? And so we kind of just work with people where they're at that point, what's coming up for them. And it might be very, oh, I went to the grocery store and didn't know what to buy, to, oh my gosh, I had a huge meltdown at work and I had to go home and I was rude to somebody, or, major trauma stuff. It's just, it depends on what happens. So that's a 4-week, once a week program, and in between you get videos, and there's lots of support you can have, and it's a community. And then, so that runs several times a year. And then our main treatment program that's been around, as I say, for over 30 years and designed after Glen Bay, is our food addiction treatment program. And that's called the Intensive. And that is a 7-day residential program, or virtual. We do either or now that COVID is on. And that is a very, very deep, intense dive into, the basics of that is you get physically abstinent. So you're putting down your substances. And then there's some deep work on kind of addiction and what it is and what's going on. And then there's a lot of emotional work, depending on what's coming up for people. We do process work. And again, it's meeting people where you're at. Are they struggling with the negative internal narrative? A lot of it really at that part is noticing that we have feelings. Like, what are our feelings? Because that's what we've avoided. So what do you feel? And just giving people, depends on where they're at. Again, people will often start saying, well, I don't have any feelings, I'm numb. So it's like, okay, let's just check that out. And then being in a group, like groups are such a brilliant, I believe it's one of the best addiction treatment models there are, is being groups, because you're with your fellows, you're with your people. And once the physical's down, we have a relationship issue. We have a living life issue. So we need life skills. So that's our 7-day program. And then it's followed up by 10 weeks of aftercare. It was 4 weeks, it was 7 weeks, it's now 10 weeks. And that is, you meet once a week as a group. You do a one-on-one coaching session with a food addiction coach, and you do an email check-in every day. So it's a pretty intense program. So that's our intensive. And then we have many people start with us by just signing up for coaching. And that can look at whatever it is for you. Some people they get a food plan and they want to talk about their food, and then just skills like how can I get support? Like what you were saying, what do I do? Okay, then we'll start suggesting some other support for people, because what we're really going for is that people can live their life and not have shift eventually. So what are the skills you need? So you can do one-on-one coaching, and that can be once a week, 3 times a week, every day for 15 minutes. We also have counselors that do counseling with people with deep emotional work. And then once you work with us as an alumni, we have a lot of different programs. We have a relapse prevention program. We have a codependence program. We have a therapeutic model through the 12 steps. We have an emotional sobriety program. We do alumni weekends. And then two other things I'll suggest, which this is another thing where people could go to. A great place to start is we have something called Shift Strong calls, and they're free, and they happen 4 times a week. And it's just a check-in. You get on the call, you check in, how you doing, what's going on, are you struggling? And it's an organic process. What's coming on the call that day? It's led by one of the food addiction professionals at Shift. And what people join all the time, and people could say, hey, I'm just doing this Kick Sugar Summit. I don't, what am I supposed to do? And share your story. And people are Shift is a very, very powerful, strong community of support at all levels for people. So that's kind of what we've got. And our staff is made up of everyone has at minimum are food addiction professional counselors, meaning that they've been certified at some level as a food addiction professional. Those are our coaches, and then our counselors have that, as well as some sort of certificate, degree in counseling and therapy. So those are and then we have lots of back of house staff, but that's what and as I say, our specialty is the middle to low bottom food addict. And all of our staff are recovering addicts. Our front of house staff are recovering addicts themselves. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So absolutely have built this program to kind of welcome people with wide open arms and kind of like hug them in, like just offer them support and intervention, it sounds like, at the level that they're at. And as you were speaking, it makes sense that, like you said, most people that you work with are that mid to severe, moderate to severe end of the spectrum, because I'm imagining somebody who's listening to this going, yeah, I might be eating too much sugar, and is able to put it down, walk away, reduce what they're eating. They're probably going, oh my gosh, this is too much. And it would be, right?
It would be too much. This is not for them. Yeah, that is too much. Like, we don't want to, we want to be treating people at the level that they need. And so there'll be many people on the Kick Sugar Summit that this is absolutely, it's interesting information, but that's where it's going to end for them. This is not the place you want to, you're not our client. We can't really serve you. And the truth is, if you're at that level, it might be harmful, right? We got to be careful that we're not going into like a restrictive mindset for people that aren't addicted, right? So we are really working with people that are addicted. Now, if people are unsure, the Get Food Freedom, both the 30-day completely online, or the names are a bit similar, or Get Food Freedom Now, which is when you're in person or not in person, but you're virtually with a professional. It would come out very clear what level you need, and we do have people in those programs at all different levels. And you'll see if that level works for you, stick with it. Here's the deal. You don't have to stress about what level you're at, because believe me, it's going to show up for you. Like, if you do a certain level and it doesn't work, you're like, you need more, then you get more support. And if it works, beautiful. It might work forever. It might work for a time. So yeah, I'm really glad you said that. So for those people that are not, there's not a lot of negative consequences in their life. It's just a thought. They're curious about it. Yeah, this will be too much. This will be overwhelming and not necessary.
Yeah. I was even thinking about those folks who maybe heard us talking about like that prolonged exposure and like thinking, I'm going to throw the wrench in it now. Something like those other programs you were just now mentioning, the 30-day, like maybe those would be helpful if you're a person who is like somebody who wants to join others in your journey to kick sugar or cut back on it. And you don't like to do it alone. You like to do it with others. Yeah. But you don't necessarily need then to dive into an intensive or a codependency group or any of those other ones that might be too much and maybe even might scare you off. Who knows? So, yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, I think you'll get a lot on the Kick Sugar Summit. There'll be, there's a lot of places that do sugar-free September. And I really think support is important. And it's support at whatever level you need. And there's support out there for every different level and every different person. It's about finding what works for you. And we are not it for everybody by any stretch.
No, absolutely. But I also think there might be somebody watching this going, oh, but this might be for my sister or for my best friend or my coworker. And maybe I now have a resource to offer them if they're ever in that space to hear that there's help.
Oh, I think so, Molly. And for me, I really, my biggest passion is that, I will speak and be interviewed about this topic as much as I possibly can, because if there's anyone out there, no, I shouldn't say anyone, there's millions out there that are struggling with food addiction, sugar addiction, A, that don't know it even exists, or B, know it exists, but I've no idea what their treatment is, or have been getting treated for other things. So the more we say, hey, if you're struggling, there's a possibility it's addiction. And if it is addiction, there is amazing treatment out there. So absolutely, I think it's great information to have in any of our brains, whether we're sugar addicted or not, to go, oh, we can be sugar addicted. And so there, it opens up compassion for people that are. It's just awareness. And I think awareness is so key for people. That's all. It's just being aware.
Yes, amazing. Okay, so thinking about all that, I'm curious to know if you have found anything to be helpful for individuals to be, what we might call successful in kicking sugar for good. Like, are there any characteristics or tools that people use that you've seen over time people be successful with?
Well, and again, my brain really comes from the addiction model, but I think for everybody, if there's anything we want to put down for good, I think first of all, we have to put it down. Like moderation isn't going to work for something that we really want to have long-term freedom from. Um, Now, again, I say that really from an addictive brain, but so I think that there's different levels of that. And I would really start being aware, like, what are the names of sugar? And start reading your labels. Like, it's unbelievable what sugar is in. It's in everything. And I'll just say this one thing that people might not know is that the food industry has made it so that one of the reasons well, I don't know if this is one of the reasons, but there's many different names for sugar. And so what can happen on a label is that if a food label puts different forms of sugar in one item, the amounts of sugar are considered lower in that food item. So the sugar is listed lower on the label. So food labels are written with the ingredient that's the most in the product is listed first, right? So you want to get to know what are the names of sugar, and you want to see, is sugar listed once, twice, 5 times on a product? If it's listed 5 times on a product, but they're all low down, well, chances are it's the number one ingredient in that product. So it's about being aware, educate yourself, and then, and I've said this several times here, you want to get support. Get support. Like, talk. I mean, it's been shown over and over that that's what works. And so whatever your level of support that's needed, you want to get with other people that are doing what you're doing, so you can get encouragement on really rough days. You've got someone else there encouraging you. You can also hear other people on rough days, and you can help them. Helping others is an extremely powerful tool for us in our long-term success of doing anything. And we also get to hear, often we can think, oh my gosh, this is what's wrong with me. I can't do this. I'm not very strong. And so when we hear other people sharing their stories that are going to be similar, I guarantee you, it's like, oh, maybe I'm not just the only one. I belong. Okay, I can do this with other people. So I highly encourage people to find a group of people that are have the same goal and have similar stories. They do not have to be the same stories. And I know for me, I'm always looking for the differences in people, and then I don't have to be connected, right? But they're similar stories. And So that's one level. And then if you need more support, you want to get with professionals at whatever level it is that can support you, that know what they're talking about. They understand your level, they understand your goals, and have the tools to support you in that. So in my opinion, putting down the substance is putting down the substance. If that's what you're going for, if kicking sugar means to you, I'm really kicking sugar, then it's putting it down. And I'll just say here, we haven't talked about sweeteners, natural sweeteners, artificial sweeteners, and there's a lot of different information out there on this. But what I will say is that what I've learned, both personally and professionally, and what I see is that sweetness in any form can be addictive, whether it's a natural sweetener, an artificial sweetener, or sugar. They all can be addictive, the sweet taste. And what we've also seen when it comes to addiction, or actually even not, if people put down just the sugar, the full-on sugar, they then start using the artificial or natural sweeteners more and more and more and more, so that they can have that sweet taste, so that then they either become addictive or become a problem. And the other thing I will say, I didn't talk about this in a challenge, is that it takes time for our palate to change. And as someone who's now been literally sugar sweetener free for coming up on 9 years, what tastes sweet to me now is not what tasted sweet to me 8.5 years ago. So it does change. It's a challenge. Foods can taste weird. They can taste terrible, but we do move past that. So that's again why we want support. I'm kind of all over the place here, but I think that's an important thing to tell people, is that it can be like, oh my gosh, I have to live my life having this food that tastes like this. Believe me, it will change. And then food actually tastes more and more like it was supposed to taste. And so for me now, I'm having a piece of fruit is so sweet, where before fruit, like I didn't understand why people even had fruit, So anyways, I just want to put that out there. I got off course, Molly. I think your question was,
Not at all.
what are the tools?
Yeah, the tools. And I can see how alternative or artificial sweeteners might be a tool for some people, but not for all. And again, I think it goes back to, what is true for you. If you're using it now more and more and more and more, chances are you fall more on that moderate to severe side of things, and it's lighting up your brain in a similar way, where maybe if you're more on the milder end of things, maybe it's a nice step down for you until you find a different way, or maybe it just continues to work for you, and that's awesome.
Again, Molly, I totally agree. There is different levels of this. So for some people, just like when I worked in the drug and alcohol world, for some people, they would, they were crack addicts, and then there was an in-between, something that allowed them to go and live their life. They got their children back. So are they really sober and drug-free? No, but oh my gosh, they had an amazing life, So I agree with you 100%, is that there is a step down for some people, and it could work. And that's what you'll find out, if it works for you. That's what I will tell you. You don't need to worry. You're going to find out if it works for you. So if you put down sugar, but stevia works for you and it's okay. So I absolutely agree. And again, you're going to find out your level there. You don't have to worry about it. Your life will start showing you this works or it doesn't work. So tools, I just want to meet back on that for a sec. So again, I think it's about, finding what works. What is it for you? What is your goal? Are you going completely sugar-free? Are you saying, I want to cut down to just using it on the weekends? Like, what is your goal? And then get support from people, both your fellows and professionals, that understand your level of support and can give you that level of support for what you need. And also people in your life that if that level of support isn't really working for you, they're willing to be honest and share with you, hey, this is what I see going on. I think it's so important that we have people in our lives that can really be honest with love with us, with what's going on. Yeah, that's what I got for tools.
I think it's amazing. I mean, I tell people all the time, I've been in this field for 18 years and I can only speak anecdotally, right? And I've worked in corrections, I've worked with child protective services, I've worked in sexual assault. I've worked in some pretty gnarly areas, if you will, right? And my number one thing when people ask me, like, do people get better? I said, listen, the number one thing I see for people getting better anecdotally is support, quality support. Like you were saying, like that they have the professionals that, right, like whatever that team of professionals is that they need to have, be it a psychiatrist, a general physician, a counselor, a pastor, who knows, right? Like whatever kind of individual or professional, if industry, if you will, that needs to fit into that, but then also that peer side. And it doesn't have to be like this huge support system. You don't have to have 100 people. It just has to be quality people, right? And that's honestly, I would have to agree with you. That's probably been, you say support over and over and over again. And I agree. I think the other thing that I heard you say, and that I would also agree with, is like finding your way, stay curious, what works for you. Like, don't just try the sweetener thinking, the alternative sweetener or the whatever, and think this is now my new way, period. Get curious about it. Like, okay, I want to cut back on sugar. Can this work for me? Does this work for me? How would I know if this is working for me or not? What signs am I going to look out for? And maybe we go back to you answering the earlier question, like, am I using more and more? Is it all that I can think about? Am I giving up things in order to like go consume that thing, right? Like those same things can apply to something like sweeteners, whether they be alternative or, the fake, the substitute ones. So I love that answer. Thank you so much. So what does Shift have coming up that we should know about late 2023, like last quarter of the year, maybe even early 2024? Are there any intensives? Are there new programs opening up? Or talk to us about what we can expect from Shift.
Yeah, so we do. I mean, I feel like we have programs going constantly. So we have the Get Food Freedom Now coming up in October. And so that is the 4-week led by a food addiction professional. So once a week for 4 weeks, you're online with a group. There's videos in between during the week. You're getting your food plan, you're getting support from each other and from the coach. So that's coming up October. It's starting in September. It's starting September the 17th. And it goes until October the 8th. And then the food freedom, the virtual food freedom program is you can join that anytime. It's always on our website. So that's always going. And then the next program, we have an in-person, our intensive program in Florida. We mainly run them in Florida in the US and Vancouver in Canada. And we have an in-person intensive coming up in November. And it starts on November the 9th. So that's for 1 week. So the Get Food Freedom Now, September the 17th, for those folks that are just, they may not be addicted, they may not know, they're just curious. And then we have the in-person intensive. And as I say, that's really designed for middle to late stage food addicts. That's in Florida on November the 9th. And then in January, we start the year, we will have the virtual intensive, which is the same. And I want to be clear, when I say the intensive, that means the 1 week intensive program. November, it's in person. In January, it's virtual, followed up by 10 weeks of aftercare. So they're like an 11-week program. So they both have that. And the aftercare, whether the intensive is in person or not, is all virtual. So that is the middle of January. And then we do like 5 of those a year. So those are the kind of the 3 main ones coming up.
And I imagine that we'd be able to go to your website and see, like, as those dates are solidified, we can go on there and see what's coming up. If, we're watching this in September, October, and we're too late, maybe you're full for November or something, we can see what's coming up in the new year, all of that. And then do we also just go to your website and sign up for a free consultation? Like, how do we get a hold of you if we want to talk to you?
Yeah, great. I'm glad you said that. the September Get Food Freedom is going to be too late for this. Got it. So there will be, the Get Food Freedom now runs about every 2 months. So there will be more of those. So yeah, so our website, foodaddiction.com, all of our programs are on there, including the consultation. And as I say, we have a lot of openings. We try and book openings for our consults. We do many in a week. And it's one of the first things you'll see on our website. You just pick a time and you'll get one of us. You might get me, you might get somebody else, just chatting about what we actually chat about with people is we definitely talk about shift, but we want to hear about people, like what you're doing, where you're at. And we have many other suggestions that aren't shift. We kind of give them the range of the services that we know about that are out there. So you can absolutely go to our website and get those, and all of our contact information is on there, as well as all of our programs are on there. And the Shift Strong calls that I was talking about that are free, the link to those are on there, and anyone can join those. They're 4 times a week. They're 1 hour long. They are on video. They are on Zoom. So we want people to be on video. And it doesn't matter where you're at in your process or what you're doing. You can join those at any time. And again, all of that information is on foodaddiction.com.
Amazing. Well, I'm just, like I said at the beginning, I'm honored to have you here with me today, Amanda. You're putting so much goodness out into the world. I think doing something like this is about prevention and early intervention, just spreading the message, and like you said, like not everybody who's watching this is going to meet criteria for addiction, but even if you're thinking this might be an issue, try cutting back, see how that goes, get the support. Reach out to Shift, reach out to Amanda and her team, and find what you will work for you with support. And I think that is beautiful. And the fact that you're offering 4 1-hour meetings free each week as a support, that's phenomenal. And so I just appreciate that. Like one clinician to another, I just so appreciate that. And because I just think it's you just can't put a price tag on something like that, right? To just have that quality free support, thinking back to like what makes people successful, support.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Molly. And I just want to honor you too and the work you do in this industry. It's really a big deal. And I'm just grateful to have colleagues like you that show up and do this work. So thank you so much for taking the time to interview me.
Oh, yes, absolutely. All right. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this interview. And before you go, do one more thing. Stop, think back on the interview while it's fresh in your mind, and write down your favorite takeaway in a special dedicated journal. If you do this, at the end of the summit, you'll have a page or 2 of nuggets of wisdom to guide you forward. And remember, this is just the beginning. At the end of the summit, you'll be invited to attend a free webinar where I will personally summarize the key insights of our speakers and pull it all together into a practical plan of action. You can also check out our Facebook page where you can connect with others and ask questions, and our Kick Sugar Coach podcast and YouTube channel for additional inspiration. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next interview.